Now we will begin today's webinar on Make Ahead holiday recipes that nourish your body and soul. My name is Madison McMahon Ward. I am the program manager for Triage Cancer, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Julie Lanford. Julie Lanford is the Wellness Director for Cancer Services. She is a registered dietitian, licensed nutritionist, and board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition over 10 years, and with over 10 years of experience working in oncology. And I'm going to let Julie continue to introduce herself. And if you want to read more about her, we have her speaker bio on our website. Remember, if you have any questions for Julie, please type them in to the Q&A box. And if you experience any technical problems, you can send me a chat message. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie.
Thanks. So now you all saw my short hair, but I have COVID hair now. It's nice and long. And I have lots of information today and would encourage you, please enter any questions in the Q&A box because I think it'll be more interesting and I can address kind of the questions that you maybe came here for before we sign off today. So please use that box if anything comes to mind, and we'll incorporate that into the presentation. All right, let me see if I can. Oh, here we go. All right. So you got a little bit of information about me, and I always share more about my background because it seems that everybody has an opinion when it comes to food. But let's be honest, they're not all expert opinions. And so it can be very confusing. Even as a dietitian, sometimes I'm confused by the nutrition information that's out there. So I always encourage people to make sure they dig in and figure out where their nutrition information is coming from and to get it from a reliable source. So registered dietitians essentially are the experts in food and nutrition. We've been trained in how nutrition, in the body works and how you can manage disease using nutrition. And so we all go through a specific amount of training. So that's the registered dietitian nutritionist piece. And then I am a board certified specialist in oncology nutrition, which just means I have to pass an exam and that's my specialty. And then these are the colleges I went to. Okie dokie. So what we're going to cover today, we are going to kind of cover a few different topics. We're going to talk about general nutrition recommendations in regards to cancer survivorship. I'm going to cover what's most important, specifically around holiday meals and what your approach should be. Why use make ahead recipes? What holiday recipes can be made ahead, and then a sample menu of what I would use. So these are the general recommendations around cancer survivorship and nutrition. And there are evidence-based recommendations for cancer survivors, and the recommendation is actually for survivors to follow the recommendations that we give the general public on cancer risk reduction because the information is the same. And two of my favorite places to sort of update yourself on what the current recommendations are is the American Institute for Cancer Research, which is, I can go ahead and put in the chat here, AICR.org. That is one. And then the American Cancer Society also puts out evidence-based recommendations around cancer and nutrition. And so that's just cancer.org. And generally those two groups agree, which is also helpful to know. And the recommendations are that cancer survivors and those interested in reducing cancer risk would eat a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. So the reason is that plant foods give important nutrients called phytochemicals, or if you're not comfortable with the word chemical, you might prefer phytonutrients, which is the basis for a cancer-fighting diet. So they work. This is just how our bodies are designed. I mean, it sounds very technical with words like phytochemicals and antioxidants and neutralizing damage and supporting the immune system. But quite honestly, this is just how our bodies work, and our bodies function at their best when we provide them with the nourishment they need to function. And the way we are designed as humans to receive nourishment is through food. So when we eat food, that provides our body with the nutrients that it needs to function. And what we see is when populations of people focus most of their food intake around plant foods, they have better health outcomes. I would say there's no magical food. So for some people that might disappoint you because you just want to eat the one magic food and then be done with it. But it really is this sort of habit or food intake pattern is what I call it. The typical foods you eat most often that are most important. And it's more around food groups than it is any particular foods. Okay. So again, what goes with the general recommendations might seem a little basic, but when I'm working with clients and helping them understand what's most important, I find the more simple, the better. And so the plate on the left here is actually what I call the typical American plate, which is, mostly covered in meat and then some kind of processed starchy food, and then a tiny little corner of vegetables covered in cheese sauce. That's probably not real cheese. So that's the typical American, right? So when we're talking about getting lots of plants, really the biggest place they're getting plants on their plate is in that tiny little corner under the cheese sauce. But what we see is the most effective way to get plenty of plants in is to actually cover half your plate in fruits or vegetables or a combination, a quarter of your plate in a starch that would be something like a whole grain or a starchy vegetable like potatoes or and then a protein, which is what I call a choose your own adventure. Your protein might be meat or dairy or fish, or your protein might be a plant protein like beans, nuts, or seeds. And that's where, people might choose to be a vegan, but you don't have to be a vegan to eat a plant-based diet. Plant-based diet just means you eat lots of plants. And whether you have meat with your plants or not is not important to me. What matters to me is, do you eat lots of plants? If you have meat to help you, swallow those plants down, that's fine, assuming it's in the ratio that you kind of see here on the right. And so I think that you'll find, there's lots of different ways to eat. There's no certain foods you have to eat that will meet these recommendations. So my approach around nutrition and healthy eating is that every time you eat, that is your opportunity to promote your health. So if you're thinking about the foods you're eating, providing you with these nutrients that help neutralize damage or support your immune system, it's not magical. This is just how it works. Antioxidants are one type of phytonutrient. There's lots of different types. Flavonoids, carotenoids are a type of antioxidant. And so all of these are found in a variety of different foods, and you can actually get them, orange fruits and vegetables have a lot of flavonoids. Well, you could get flavonoids out of oranges, you could get them out of carrots, you could get them out of sweet potatoes, you could get them out of cantaloupe. It doesn't matter which one. It's just by eating lots of different colors of plant foods, it helps your body get the nutrients it needs. And of course, there's lots of different seasonal foods, or depending on where you live, different foods grow. And so eating what's available to you and getting a variety, I think, is what's important. And that in itself helps to give your body the nutrition that it needs. The other thing I really like to sort of drive home for people is to understand that getting your nutrients in pill form, like supplements, is not ideal. We much prefer, and your body functions better when you get nutrients in food, not just from pills. So some people, I think, take the attitude of, well, I can't really eat a healthy diet because I don't like those foods. So I'm going to take a nutrition supplement to get me the nutrients that I need. And what the data shows is that it doesn't actually work that way. So we've had lots and lots of studies on supplements that generally show they are kind of subpar to getting your nutrients in food. And the reason is that food provides you with this large variety of nutrients in one food. So like the carrots we just talked about, or the sweet potatoes, or the cantaloupe, it's not just flavonoids that are in there. There's lots of other nutrients that come along with it, like fiber and vitamins and minerals. And so our bodies really do prefer to get nutrients in the concentrations as they're provided in food form, rather than going out and getting a supplement where you might get a really high concentration of just one nutrient. And if you took a carrot and picked out all the nutrients, I had carrots with my lunch today. If you picked out all the nutrients that were in a carrot and put it in a pill, it would look like a carrot, because that's what a carrot is. So the idea that somehow you can take high dose supplements and that will function better in your body just hasn't been proven to be true. There are cases in time where you would need a nutrition supplement, and that's typically if you're taking a medication where we know it interacts and you need to either stay away from certain nutrients, or you might be more prone to deficiency and so you need to take a supplement. Or when you're getting your lab work, your doctor may notice, hey, your potassium is low, or your iron is low, or your vitamin D is low. When you have low levels of nutrients, it's difficult to bring them back up to normal level with food on its own. It often takes supplements to bring them up to normal levels. But once you're in the normal range, you may or may not have to keep taking that supplement. So I always encourage people, that's why we say work with your medical team and try to figure out what the best strategy is for you. All right, so this is when we start to move into more of the information around holiday eating. And what I find is for a lot of people, they think that somehow your holiday meals are harmful, or that, you know, by eating all of this junk food in the holiday season, somehow that's, you know, negative effects on your health, and then you have to sort of whip yourself back into shape in January. And I don't find that sort of approach to holiday eating to be particularly helpful or healthy in general. And so I do talk a lot with my clients about their approach to holiday eating, and it's something I've written on my blog several times. So you can see here, I am giving you permission to eat too much during the holidays, because the truth is you are supposed to overeat sometimes. Our bodies are made to go through times of feast and famine. And so feasting just means that you eat too much. And of course, when more appropriate time is there to eat too much than during the holidays when you're having all this wonderful food. So certainly eating too much sometimes, or feasting, is perfectly appropriate and fine. And then there, of course, are times where we eat smaller meals when you're sick or when you're not that hungry, or, you know, just that's normal eating is what I would call it. So the idea that somehow, you know, your Thanksgiving meal or your Christmas meal or whatever kind of celebration that you or your family typically does where food is very central, the idea that somehow that meal has to be a well-balanced meal that's not too high in calories is, to me, taking the wrong focus. It's taking away from what we should be doing, which is feasting and enjoying time together. So remember that. Now, I do have clients who are like, yeah, but what about people who feast like every single day, you know, between Thanksgiving and Christmas? And I think that's a valid question. And what I typically say is, you know, you might have leftovers, you might, you know, feasting for that one day seems appropriate, maybe 2 days. And then in between, you want to kind of get more in touch with your body's fullness and hunger cues and really paying attention to those again. And it might be that there's a day, you know, after you've eaten a feast where you tend to eat less. And so really paying attention to how your body feels is what I would suggest. So somebody's asking if I recommend any meal preparation services to help eat healthy if someone doesn't like cooking or doesn't know how to start eating healthy. If you have the financial resources to do that, I think those are great. I have also noticed, I think what's important for people is that they eat food that's nourishing. And you can kind of do that in a lot of different ways. We, of course, encourage a lot of eating at home or preparing food at home. And so I do think that these meal services are really helpful in guiding people who don't want to have to meal plan, which to me is some of the most difficult parts of cooking at home, is just thinking about what I'm going to cook and then having to figure out what I have and what I don't have and go to the grocery store. And then, you know, so that's the nice thing that those meal services will do for you, is you just, you know, click on the recipe you want, and they ship it to you. Some of them are healthier than others. So, and it's also up to you. So you choose the meals. If you are wanting to include more plant proteins in your meals, then you would want to look for some of those meal services that might offer more vegetarian or vegan options. That doesn't mean that you have to eat vegan or vegetarian all the time. And then I'll also say that several grocery stores, at least in my area, also offer similar kind of meal kits. Or other things where they do make it really simple for you. What I found with those is that they sometimes can be heavy on the meat. So when you think about the plate, they might not have exactly the ratio that we're kind of looking for, or they might be a little bit light, say on the vegetable side. But the other thing is I often use salad kits. Now they sell so many different flavors of salad kits. So it's the same thing I used to, when people use microwave meals kind of more often, now we have this meal preparation thing. With microwave meals, a lot of times I would tell people, okay, if that's your best choice, because you really don't have time to cook or you don't have the skills, you can always add a vegetable on the side to sort of beef up maybe if there needs to be more vegetables. So I think those are great options. I don't have any kind of preference on which one you try. I've tried a couple of different ones, and then I'll say it helps in getting other people cooking too, like my husband or my kids, when they have the step-by-step guides. So I do think they are really great for people who aren't really the cook types or don't have the kitchen skills. Okay, so what's most important around the holidays is, first of all, meals should be fun. So it should be an enjoyable experience. Of course, I don't know, maybe be delicious should be number one, but holiday meals, it's who you're with that matters the most. So let's say it's fun with the people around you. It should be really delicious. The food should taste good. Okay, so I don't want anybody deciding that for their holiday meal, they're going to try out this new, quote, healthy recipe that doesn't taste good. Don't put food that doesn't taste good on your holiday table. That's all I'm saying. If you want to try out recipes, maybe your family's adventurous and that's fine, but I would not try out a recipe on a holiday meal. I would pick the things that I know were delicious. Your meals should nourish your body and your soul, and it should not be focused on nutrition content. So I typically encourage families to avoid any talk around how healthy or not healthy or good or bad or whatever language you tend to use around food. I think talking about how delicious it is and how you love this recipe and you just remember growing up when your grandma made it or whatever kinds of family stories, like those are the things that should happen at family meals. And it can be extra challenging for people in treatment who are having taste changes or who are having digestive issues, or they're not able to eat some of the foods that they associate with the holiday meals because of their treatment side effects. So by sort of taking the pressure away around nutritional content or how, if food is good or bad, and then just allowing people to eat what they can, what they want, and enjoying their company, I think can really help to keep the meal focused on what's most important. So we are going to move into some of what I say are my favorite make-ahead recipes. Now, the reason that you would want to use make-ahead recipes is because it does help remove stress so you can enjoy your time. So the last thing I want to do is spend all day on my holiday in the kitchen preparing things. So there are foods that I like to have at holiday meals that I can't buy anywhere. Like it requires me to make them with my family recipe or my favorite recipe. And so I try to do those ahead of time, if at all possible, so that during the actual day, I can kind of relax and enjoy time with people. And then the other reason is that you have things ready so that you might not have to fight over the oven space. You can get more help from others because typically on the day of your, big event, people are busy, spending time together, and you don't always want to ask them to stop talking or visiting with people to help you out. If you can get people to help you ahead of time, then, or heck, you might not have to do any of the cooking. If you do all the planning and you assign people to do their dishes ahead of time, that can be really helpful. And it does decrease the amount of dishes on the big day, because if you've prepped and used all of those, prep kind of bowls and measuring cups and all those things have already been used and washed and put away, then all you have to do is bake as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about what my favorite make-ahead recipes are. Now, I will remind you that while we're not necessarily focused on the nutritional value of the foods, when you think about holiday meals, you're probably, putting a lot of different food groups on your plate and a lot of different colors. And so I think, to me, that's what it does actually represent, a very nutritious meal when you think about all of those things. So as we're going through here, I might pick out a few of them just to highlight some ingredients that are particularly sort of have been studied in terms of cancer risk reduction or being particularly nutritious. And then, but always remembering that that's not the most important thing for our holiday meals. So for breakfast, what I often do, I have a coffee cake recipe from my grandma that sort of was a traditional family recipe. So I often prep all of the dry ingredients the night before in the bowl that I want to mix it in. And then I put all the wet ingredients, so it's like buttermilk and egg and a little bit of oil, I think. I even have it measured out in a measuring cup in the fridge, so that when I get up that morning, I don't even really have to think too much. I just have to mix them together, put it in a baking dish and stick it in the oven, because I do like to have my coffee cake hot. So that's the one challenge with make-ahead recipes, is that if you still will need to bake it if you want them warm on the day of. So I do a coffee cake, but I have also made this baked French toast. And you can make this French toast. It's just an overnight kind of thing. You make it ahead of time. It has, bread pieces and milk and egg. And I think it calls for cream cheese and blueberries. And you can tailor that however you want to. Sometimes I don't have any cream cheese. I just don't put it in there. And the blueberries, you could use other frozen berries and that would work fine. And I will highlight that berries themselves are on one of the American Institute for Cancer Research has a list of sort of foods that fight cancer. So this is the foods that have the most research around cancer risk reduction. And blueberries and raspberries are on that list, as well as strawberries. So those are great ways to get fruits in. You can make this recipe. They probably call for some kind of, regular white bread. If your family is, open to it, you could put whole grain bread in there or some kind of multi-grain bread, and that would be a great way to get some whole grains in. But again, with my coffee cake recipe from my grandma, I don't want to tweak it too much because I want it to taste right. So I think I've like added flaxseed or something to it, but I usually use half white and half wheat flour to make sure that it has the right texture. Appetizers, these are some of my favorite appetizers. I love spinach dip. And I've been making this one for a really, several years now. And it actually, I think, tastes better when you make it a couple of days ahead so that the flavors can, kind of sit and marinate together. And I like mine spicy, like a little bit of hot. So I tend to put extra hot sauce in it or add some hot pepper flakes. So I've got the recipe link for you on there, and I have all of these on one page on my website. So we'll make sure to put that link in the chat. So the spinach dip is really good. Also, it uses like low-fat sour cream and cream cheese in it, and then plenty of spinach. So that's a great way to get in leafy greens. I think it tastes really good. Another thing for appetizers is having soup. So I love a crock pot. And a lot of, of course, soups you can usually make ahead of time. You can freeze them and then just pull them out a couple of days ahead so that they thaw, and then heat it up the day of. Or you can even think about, if you're going to want to have a soup, let's say kind of midday, or even mid-morning, you can put all your ingredients in the crock pot or even the Instant Pot and just have it ready, and then stick it on, like turn it on, whatever, 6 hours ahead. Sometimes I make soup overnight. So Italian soup or minestrone is a great way to get vegetables. With a minestrone soup, it typically has kidney beans or other kind of beans in it. Curried winter squash soup is delicious. And there's lots of different ways. When we use winter squash, you could use either like acorn squash or butternut squash or even pumpkin. And you could buy canned pumpkin to use in this. So the link that I put on here is a local chef where I live, and he had us roast the butternut squash before we pureed it for the soup. Now, I personally think, I'm sure that adds a little flavor, but it adds a lot of work for me. So in my, I want to lower the stress kind of holiday meal, I'd probably go with a canned pumpkin. But it just depends on what you like. And winter squash is also something that is on our list, our AICR list of foods that fight cancer. So that's a really fun way and delicious. My kids love that winter squash soup. Garden veggie soup, I could not pull it together. I have a recipe for garden veggie soup. So if you want it, you can email me, because we print copies for clients here in our office. And I don't know why it's not on my website, but I made it with a group recently. And it's really just like cabbage and zucchini and a few other vegetables, and then cooked into a little bit of broth. And it's really good. I think it's a great way. Soups are a great way to get vegetables in. If you feel like your main, plates aren't really going to have a lot of vegetables, that's fine. And if you want to have a soup or something, I often find I'm starving by the time that we get to the main meal, because we often eat our main meal kind of later in the afternoon. So I like to have appetizers, because we all know what happens when people get too hungry. Then they get hangry, and nobody wants a holiday meal with hangry people. So having appetizers out, having, hot soup, so that if it's a cold day, it really feels very nourishing, is really great. And then pumpkin butter, really fun. All kinds of things are good to dip in pumpkin butter. You can do fruits, or you can do like ginger snap type cookies. But this is another, if you've got out canned pumpkin for your winter squash soup, you can use some of it to make pumpkin butter dip. All right, so I am not a big meat eater, although I do eat meat, so I don't consider myself a vegan or a vegetarian. But at holiday meals, some people in the family, it is all about the meat. And so I think there's a couple of ways to make this easy. When I grew up, it was all about the turkey, and the turkey would be in that oven forever. And you better hope that you're cooking it for the right amount of time. And then it's like, you're timing all the other recipes to come out with the turkey. To me, that is too stressful. I don't like the turkey taking up the oven for that long. I don't like, if the turkey didn't actually cook all the way through, then it's going to delay everything. So the way I prefer to do it, I like ham. I don't eat ham real often, but it's like, I want ham at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so we just buy a ham that's already cooked, easy peasy. And then I have also purchased a turkey before, but it still felt, didn't have the same feel. So 2 options, I think, if you want to avoid using the oven for that long. I have done this where I've cooked my turkey in an Instant Pot. Now I have like the largest Instant Pot, which is 8 quart, and I crammed a 10-pound turkey in there, and it worked fine. I mean, it was pretty easy. I just, there's a link there for the recipe or the length of time that I cooked it for. Some people, they'll cook turkeys in a crock pot or an Instant Pot. They pull them out, they put them in the oven under the broiler so you can get the crisp skin. Me, I don't care that much. I don't want to do that extra work, but that is a possibility. And then I have a friend who gave me this idea about cooking turkey breast in a crock pot, which actually I think would be more of my thing. I did the Instant Pot, but she started cooking it in a crock pot because she found that her in-laws weren't always like on time, or they weren't always interested in like having a scheduled time to eat. It was kind of more like, well, when stuff's ready, we'll eat, which is difficult to do with a turkey. And so her solution was, all right, I'll just get a turkey breast. You know, you can get various sizes. They usually come frozen. You make sure they're thawed out, but put that in the crock pot. So then the turkey will be ready whenever everything else is ready, or whenever people arrive, you know, when they get their stuff together. And there's not this sort of feeling of pressure around, oh my gosh, the turkey's going to be done. People better be ready. So I really like that idea. And that'll be something that I put into place. All right, sides. Now, I told you I'm not a big meat eater. So sides are where it's at, if you ask me. I could have a holiday meal that had 0 meat and just had a whole lot of sides, because I love the side dishes and they fill you up. And then I'm like, wait, I don't have room to try them all. So I try to, like, when I'm planning my meals, I don't want to have too many sides because I want to be able to eat a little bit of everything. And my plate can't hold it if we have too many sides. So we always have mashed potato or some kind of potato and cheese casserole. I do have my favorite mashed potato recipe, which is my Aunt Donna's garlic mashed potatoes. So that is on there, and it's something you can make a day ahead. So you can basically, you know, you cook the potatoes, you mash them all up, or use your blender, not your blender, your whatever, mixer, and then add, you know, sour cream and garlic and all those delicious things, chives and salt and pepper. And you put it in your baking dish, and then you can put that in the fridge and then just heat it up the next day. So it's ready to go. Now I have done this cauliflower version. So if you have kind of an adventurous family who likes to try different things and you're thinking, oh, okay, I thought the cauliflower version of the mashed potatoes actually tasted it smelled exactly the same. Like when I was making it, I did this for a cooking class, I don't know, a year ago. And it smelled, I was like, yeah, this smells just like my Aunt Donna's mashed potatoes. It doesn't have quite the same texture, although it's pretty close. So if you're just looking for ways, kind of fun ways to get more cruciferous vegetables, which is cauliflower is on the list of the AICR's foods that fight cancer, I think that would be fun. Now, if your family loves the mashed potatoes and there's no substitute for them, I wouldn't be swapping things out. So it kind of just depends on your situation. Whipped sweet potatoes are things that I have also done a day ahead. Again, most of these, like anything in a casserole type dish, the stuffing, those things would generally cook at 350 degrees for, 45 minutes or an hour, even reheated. So if you whipped your sweet potatoes, mashed them, or however you're doing it, and then put it in a container, I have put my mashed potatoes, my whipped sweet potatoes, my stuffing, kind of all of that in the oven to reheat all together, which makes it really handy. Now the kale salad, I did not grow up eating kale. And of course, we all know that, what was it, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, kale had this, few years of fame where people were just all about kale everything. And I thought, I was like, I've never really had kale, but I tried it. I had it sauteed with onions. So that was the way that I was first introduced to kale. I thought it was delicious. I like cooked kale. I would actually have cooked kale with my holiday meals because I think it's really good. Kale is also on this list of foods that fight cancer. But what happened was somebody told me about a kale salad recipe. And this was when kale was first, kind of popular. And I was thinking, I've never eaten raw kale. I didn't think of kale as something you could eat raw. And I didn't, I've seen it in salads before, and I didn't really like it because it was kind of tough to eat. And so someone pointed me to a recipe where you massage the dressing into the kale. And it was a game changer. And it's a very lemony dressing that I love, kind of tart lemony flavors. And when you massage the lemon dressing into the kale, it softens the leaf. It kind of makes it a little bit brighter. It's not as tough to eat. It's not as bitter. And this salad is delicious. And it is seriously, in the holidays, we now make it every holiday. It's the first thing that's gone. Like, we don't have leftover kale salad because people always go back for seconds. And so the thing you can do with this, you can make it a day ahead of time, massage the dressing and everything into the kale, or you can basically prepare the kale, prepare the dressing separately, and then massage it into the kale the day of. The one thing I'll say is I put on this recipe, I put pistachios on it, which gives it a delicious sort of salty crunch. And I would not put the pistachios on a day ahead because they tend to go a little bit soggy. So always save your pistachios on the side until the last minute to put it on there. All right, more sides, because there's never enough sides. Cranberries also, I think it's just really interesting how cranberries are also on the list of the AICR's foods that fight cancer. They are delicious. And the thing is, though, you basically have to figure out how to add sugar to cranberries because they are so sour. I don't know if anybody's tried to make cranberries without sugar, but it is sour. So you can put them in like muffins, or my father-in-law makes like a cranberry relish that's more savory. That is it. But I have tried a few different ways to kind of cut back on the amount of sugar, and it helps if I, use orange juice, or one time I even tried sweet tea in the cranberries. It was a little weird. But this citrus ginger cranberry sauce is my favorite because you put, it just gives a really great flavor. You put fresh ginger in when you're cooking the cranberries, and you put like orange peel and orange juice in while you're cooking it. I use just the amount of sugar that I think that I need to get it to sort of gel up. So there's that chemistry piece of cooking, but also to make it so that it's not so tart you won't eat it. And then what you do is you cool it down and you add some candied ginger after it's cooled down. And I think it's delicious. The other thing I like to do, and you can make cranberry sauce, you can make it weeks ahead of time and keep it in the freezer. You serve it cold. I personally like to eat it hot. So sometimes I just have some of the cranberry sauce the day that I'm making it before I put it in the fridge. The other thing that's really great to do with leftover cranberry sauce, because there always seems to be a lot, is I buy plain yogurt and then I put the cranberry sauce in the yogurt. So it's sort of like the fruit on the bottom thing with yogurt. So I think it's a great add and very seasonal. All right, so broccoli and rice casserole is on here. I personally don't make a broccoli and rice casserole, but I did see it when I've been to, when other people have cooked for me. And I think that it's a great way to get more cruciferous vegetables. You could use brown rice if you wanted to. And it's something that you could freeze ahead of time. So I like that idea of having it in the freezer and then being able to just bake it the day or make it a day ahead of time and have it in the fridge. The stuffing that I like is, it's my dad's stuffing recipe. It's nothing fancy, but we always put, celery, carrots, onion, and then it's like whole grain stuffing mix, and we put black olives in it. Some people might think that's weird, but I like it. And then you can make that ahead of time. Now, my parents like to stuff it in the bird, but I don't do that for food safety reasons. I'm a dietitian. I had to take all these food safety classes, and I just can't get over the stuffing in the bird. So I always cook my stuffing separate. And then you're able to prep it ahead of time and then bake it the day of. And it's just the seasonings marinate just like they do with the spinach dip that I mentioned. Some other things that you can add to stuffing that I think is really fun. I've seen like people will add watercress, or they'll use rice in their stuffing. So I think there's lots of different ways that you can kind of just, mush stuff together. And then there's the dressing, which I guess is stuffing's a little more dry, and dressing for sure could be made ahead of time and then cooked the day of. Some people, especially in the South, I live in North Carolina, and mac and cheese is a very standard thing to have at holiday meals. Delicious. Now I have a version here that I got. A Southern chef taught me this, and it is carrot mac and cheese. You can do this recipe with carrots, or You could do it with pumpkin or sweet potato, probably butternut squash. But essentially what you do is with the cheese sauce, you puree the squash or the carrots or the sweet potato, and then you add the cheese to that sauce so it's the right color. And that's kind of the point. And then it adds a little bit of sweet flavor. I think it's really delicious. So I think that's a fun way if you like to add more, vegetables into your mac and cheese. That's a fun way to do it. Personally, I like green peas on my mac and cheese, but that's just me. And then roasted veggies can be really delicious. Now, it's one of those things where I really feel like if I'm going to roast vegetables, then I'm going to want to know when we're going to eat, and everything's going to have to time up right so that the vegetables are hot when we eat them. So I think I would have a hard time, like I'm planning to do those. I would prep them ahead of time and then wait until, 45 minutes before you think you're going to eat to go ahead and roast them. And the things that I will point out about roasting vegetables, there's a lot of great healthy vegetables that can be roasted and really, I think, enhances their flavor. So of course, Brussels sprouts are kind of the hot thing right now for roasting. And they are on the AICR's list of foods that fight cancer. Carrots also on this list are great roasted. Broccoli, cauliflower is great roasted. Asparagus is delicious roasted. And all of those things are, as well as onions, are on this list. And what I typically do is try to figure out, well, based on all the other recipes we're having, do I have any leftover vegetables that I can just, use for roasted? Beets are beautiful and also really delicious roasted. So all you have to do essentially is, toss your cubed or cut up vegetables in oil, salt and pepper, put them in the oven. If you want to get fancy, some people will have like bacon, with their Brussels sprouts, but that's kind of up to your family what you like. So desserts. And my thing is I have a few favorite desserts, and I know those are the desserts that I'm going to eat. I don't need a wide variety of desserts because by this point I'm pretty full and I'm going to want to eat the desserts that I've been looking forward to for a year. And so I don't actually tend to plan for a lot of desserts. Now, some families, like, they have the whole dessert spread. And that's awesome. So whatever works for you, but I'll tell you the ones that I typically use. First of all, I love this chocolate peanut butter pie. It is made with tofu, which I know sounds weird, and I promise you tastes amazing. And tofu comes from soybeans, which is on our list here of foods that fight cancer. So it's a great way. Now, of course, it's a protein and it's a vegetable, but it's not going to count as a protein or a vegetable at your meal. And I have had people ask me that. Oh, well, I'm a vegetarian. Can I just eat that chocolate pie for my protein? No, that's not going to work. But it does mean that your dessert is giving you extra protein. There's sugar, there's, chocolate in it. It tastes like dessert. Don't get me wrong. This is not a vegetable protein dessert. This is just a plain old dessert that happens to have extra protein in it. And the nice thing about this is you don't have to bake it. So all you do is put it in the food processor, mix it up, pour it into a pie crust. I just buy the graham cracker crust. I pour it in there, I stick it in the fridge, and it's ready the next day. I don't make my own graham cracker crust because that's too much work for me, and they're really easy to buy. But you could do that yourself if you wanted to as well. So I really like that. I do have a recipe for a vegan pumpkin pie. It also uses tofu in it, which I think is really handy. Although it's funny because last night I was telling my daughter about it, and she's like, well, I just want the regular pumpkin pie, which is fine with me because I don't really like pumpkin pie that much, but it does feel like something you should have at your holiday meal. So I told her about this, one that I make here. And she said, well, what's wrong with regular pumpkin pie? Like, eggs are good for you. And, so it's fine. Whichever way you want to make pumpkin pie is fine. But this is an option if you do have people in your family who are vegan. I think the hardest part about that recipe, you have to do some flaxseed to replace the egg. But it really is quite simple. And I think I actually even did that recipe. I might have done it for triage cancer. I can't remember. But anyway, and then the other thing I'll point out for make ahead is holiday cookies are really great. Like in the holiday season, if people are giving you treats and you're like, whoa, there's way more cookies than I can ever eat, I just start stashing them in the freezer. And, if they're a couple weeks in the freezer, they're going to taste fine when you pull them back out. You can either just let them thaw in the fridge, or I've even taken cookies from the freezer and like put them in the toaster oven just for a couple minutes to warm them up, and they're delicious. So I find that a way to sort of not be overwhelmed by the number of treats that some people will often offer during the holiday season. I put them to good use. It means I don't have to cook the cookies. But if you have traditional recipes, you of course can either make the cookies ahead of time and freeze them or put them in the fridge, or you can make the dough ahead of time and then just bring it out the day of and then cook them that day. Those are the kinds of things that I think about for the cookies. My kids, they love cookies, and it's good with hot tea or cider or things. So that's kind of nice to just have around. So those are my desserts that I tend to make ahead. And this is, I put together a sample menu of what I would tend to do for a holiday meal, most of which can be made ahead, 1 or 2 days ahead. It does require that grocery shopping ahead and maybe spending a couple of hours in the kitchen. The other shortcut I would tell you, like for the person who asked about the meal kits, I think for holiday meals, if nobody in the family is really interested in cooking or really likes it, the newer things that have come out that I've seen from my local grocery stores is that they'll sell you, holiday meal kits where they've already made everything. So, and I've done that before, and it's really saved a lot, especially the things that, they're not going to mess up, or they're not your favorite, like your family's version isn't that important to you. So things like we got a kit that had mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, turkey, ham, and like green bean casserole and stuffing. And it all came like you could go and it would come frozen, and then you just cooked it on the day of. I think that's a great time saver. And then what I would do is kind of supplement that with the side dishes. Like I might have the kale salad and some roasted vegetables and things that don't require a lot of work. And that way we're getting a wide variety of foods, but also able to save our time in the kitchen. So back to my sample menu. Breakfast, I would plan to do an overnight French toast that I can make the day before. It also helps use up any extra bread that you've got sitting around. For appetizers, I would do spinach dip, one of the soups, it's hard to pick, but minestrone soup probably, and a pumpkin dip, all that I can make 2 days ahead of time. I would put cider in a crock pot so that it's just ready kind of all day, hot cider. And then for our meat, I told you I was going to do turkey in the crock pot actually. So I would buy the ham, and then I would get turkey either in the Instant Pot or the crock pot. And then for sides, I would make the kale salad ahead of time. I would make the mashed potatoes and the sweet potatoes ahead of time, prep the veggies for roasting. I'd make the cranberries like the weekend before or a week ahead. And then the stuffing. So there's a couple of things to make a day ahead, and then figuring out how to stack them in the fridge is also the challenge. And then for dessert, always have chocolate peanut butter pie. That's my favorite. And then cookies. And I would kind of stick to that, although probably someone's going to end up making a pumpkin pie because that's how it should be. But so the only thing that I really have to do on the day of is to roast the vegetables that are already prepped ahead of time, and to heat things up. And so that's what I tend to do. And then again, focusing on what's most important. So for me, like the reason that I kind of do this is that it's important to me that we have some of our traditional family recipes that I can't buy or get someone else to make. And it's important to me that I am not stressed out and spending time in the kitchen all day long. So by doing those two things of the make ahead, then I can focus on the fact that the meals will be more fun for me because I won't be so stressed out, and therefore, other people as well, because I don't have to constantly ask them to help with this or do the dishes or clean this. And then of course it's going to be delicious because I know it's going to be delicious. It will nourish our body and soul. And just as a reminder, to try to steer the conversation away from, is the food healthy or not, and really I would focus on like how delicious it is. So if somebody and this happens, of course, if somebody in your holiday meal makes a comment about like, oh yeah, it's full of fat, but whatever, making a comment about it not being healthy or good for you or whatever, I just tend to steer towards, oh, isn't it so delicious? Or it tastes amazing. I really like, and then pick something about it, like the salmon mixing with something else. So sort of steering it away, especially if you have kids in your house. I just think it's better for them to experience holiday meals without any kind of guilt around eating, and to really focus on everyone being together. And I don't make anybody eat anything either. So if people don't like some of the foods, that's fine. They don't have to say they like it or don't like it. They don't have to put it on their plate. I don't really care. But what's important is that your family is really there together and enjoying the recipes that you've got. All right, so that pretty much wraps up kind of my planned content. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have, but if you are interested, so Madison put in the chat, there is a link to cancerdietitian.com/holiday recipes, and that will take you, all the recipes that I talked about today are linked on that page. So that'll take you, if you're interested in checking any of those recipes out. And then if you want to connect with me online, I've got the Cancer Dietitian website. I work for a nonprofit agency in North Carolina, so we don't charge for any of our programs, including Cancer Dietitian programs. I would welcome you to join me. I have an Eat the Rainbow Challenge starting the Monday after Thanksgiving, where we really focus on eating plenty of fruits and vegetables and lots of different colors. And we myth bust about fruits and vegetables and provide you with a recipe every week. And this is my new winter edition of the program. So I'm very excited. We'll have new recipes that are applicable to seasonally winter fruits and vegetables. So you're welcome to find that. It's cancerdietitian.com/rainbow. And then you can find me on all the social media channels and my bio and links over on the Triage Cancer website.